Good day to one and all. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the first Dr. K.C. Ramamurthy Endowment Lecture on Constitutional Governance and Public Policy from an Indian perspective. Constitutional governance has become an indispensable component of world countries, which primarily regulates power distribution between the branches of the government. It is an important machinery to dispense economic and social justice as manifested in the preamble to the Constitution of India. However, as all things Indian, we have our own unique take on it, and this endowment lecture seeks to shed light on its play in the Indian context. On that note, I request Dharani from first year LLB to please render the invocation song to commence the proceedings on this august occasion.
गं गणपते नमो नमः शङ्करि तनया नमो नमः गं गणपते नमो नमः शङ्करि तनया नमो नमः गं गणपते नमो नमः शङ्करि तनया नमो नमः गं गणपते नमो नमः अंगुशधर मंगलकर पंकज चरणा अंगुशधर मंगलकर पंकज चरणा वारण अंगुशधर मंगलकर पंकज चरणा वारणसा सनि पग पनि ग परे गनि पगरि सरि ग सरि सा गरि सरि पगरि गनि पग प सरि ग पनि सरि गरि नि पग प सनि सरि नि पगरि गनि पनि नि प गरि सरि पग पनि पग प सनि पनि गरि सरि ग गणपते नमो नमः शङ्करि तनया नमो नमः गणपते नमो नमः पंकजासनादि वन्दित भक्तादि हरण मुदित पंकजासनादि वन्दित भक्तादि हरण मुदित कुङ्कुमाप गुण निधे हरिकेश कुमारा कुङ्कुमाप गुण निधे हरिकेश कुमारा मन्दारसा सनि पग पनि ग परि गनि पगरि सरि ग सरि सा गरि सरि पगरि गनि पग प सरि ग पनि सरि गरि नि पग प सनि सरि नि पगरि गनि पनि नि प गरि सरि पग पनि पग प सनि पनि गरि सरि ग गणपते नमो नमः शङ्करि तनया नमो नमः गणपते नमो नमः
Thank you, Dharani, for that beautiful rendition. Deepam signifies knowledge. All our activities should be governed by the light of knowledge, especially the knowledge of dharma. With that in mind, let us light the lamp of knowledge. I now request our chief guest and all the dignitaries on the dais to kindly light the Thank you. Thank you. I now request our beloved Dean, Professor Dr. T.R. Subramania, to please deliver the welcome address.
A very good morning and warm welcome to you, ladies and gentlemen. Today is an important day in the history of CMR University and its School of Legal Studies. The CMR University came to be established in 2013 under an act of the Karnataka state government, and since then it has never looked back in its progress and development and has made a mark in the academics and other educational activities. CMR University's Law School, which was earlier called as the CMR Law School, over a period of time rose to dizzy heights and has been adjudged by India Today, Outlook, Week, and by other assessing agencies as one of the best law schools in the country. During the course of its pragmatic development, the CMR Law School has invited distinguished scholars, judges, and VIPs from public life to deliver lectures on topics of contemporary relevance, which in fact has elevated the name of CMR Law School as a premier center of legal learning. In the preceding 4 years, the CMR University's Law School Journal on Contemporary Legal Affairs has established a reputation of its own, and which is recognized by the University Grants Commission in its care list under A category as one of the reputed law journals. In these academic developments and the progress that is attained by the CMR Law School, the role of our chairman, Dr. K.C. Ramamurthy, IPS retired and former member of the Rajya Sabha, and Madam Dr. Sabita Ramamurthy, the Chancellor of CMR University, is immense and unique. In order to cherish the contribution made by our learned chairman, the Board of Governors and the Board of Management of the CMR Law School have decided to organize an endowment lecture every year on constitutional governance and public policy from an Indian perspective. Hence, for the first lecture, the university has approached Sri Dr. Venkataramani, Lord Attorney General of India, who is one of the most distinguished and most learned scholars in the country, and he has accepted the invitation and he is with us here today. Dr. Sri Venkataramani, Lord Attorney General of India, graduated in law from the Government Law College, Pondicherry, and enrolled as an advocate in July 1977 in the Bar Council of Tamil Nadu. Later, he shifted to Delhi and began his law practice. After a period of 20 years of practice, that is in 1997, his services were recognized and he was appointed as senior advocate of the Supreme Court of India. On 28 September 2022, Dr. Venkataramani was appointed as the Attorney General for India. He has served as a member of the Ethics Committee of the Indian Council for Medical Research, and he is serving as resource person at the National Judicial Academy, Bhopal, and Menon Institute of Legal Advocacy and Training. He is the adjunct faculty in several law schools, including the Jindal Global Law School. At the international level, Dr. Venkataramani has been invited by the United Nations Commissioner on Human Rights, Geneva, invited by the International Commission of Jurists, invited by the United Nations International Law Commission, Geneva, to address on specific topics. He was also a member of the subcommittee on Directive Principle of State Policy, constituted by the Commission reviewing the working of the Constitution under the chairmanship of Sri Honorable Venkatachalaya, former Chief Justice of India. His role in this committee, especially in framing the fundamental duties under the Constitution, is immense. Yesterday, I was just inviting a particular judge to attend a function. At that time, he expressed that it is the entire topic on fundamental duties under the Constitution is done by Honorable the chief guest of today. I, on behalf of the CMR University, request Madam Dr. Sabita Ramamurthy, the Chancellor of the University, to present a bouquet of flowers to Dr. Venkataramani. to welcome Sri Jaydeep, the respected Pro-Chancellor of the University, Secretary of the CMR Janadars Trust, Dr. K.C., the Vice-Chancellor, Sri Raghavendra H.B., Registrar Dr. Praveen, Professor Praneshwaran, the Director of the Law School, and all other dignitaries. We have with us Professor Sudesh Pai, Senior Advocate, eminent scholar and jurist, and a member of the Board of Studies of CMR Law School. We welcome you, sir. We have with us Mr. Ravi Kumar and his friend from the Judicial Academy. On behalf of the CMR School of Legal Studies, I welcome you too, sir. We have another important person, and he is none but an advocate in the High Court of Karnataka, Mr. Suresh, and he is an IPR specialist. On behalf of the university, I too welcome you, sir. I also welcome the Registrar of the University, Dr. Praveen. I just forgot. The Registrar Evaluation, Dr. Anil Kumar. The Academic Dean, Dr. Suja Bennett. Then all the deans and directors who have made it a point to attend the function. All of them have come, and it's a good thing to see all of them in this august function. I also welcome the members of the digital media and the press and all those who are present. Last but not the least, it is my duty to welcome all the students of the CMR Law School and a few students who have come from outside, and dear teachers of the CMR Law School and teachers from other schools as well. Once again, with best wishes and thank you.
Welcome. It is my privilege and honor to invite our chief guest of the day, Dr. R. Venkataramani, Learned Attorney General for India and Senior Advocate at the Supreme Court of India, who has kindly consented to deliver today's endowment lecture on constitutional governance and public policy from an Indian perspective. Dr. R. Venkataramani is presently serving as the Attorney General for India and is a Senior Advocate at the Supreme Court of India. Sir has completed 42 years of practice in the Honorable Supreme Court in various branches of law, including constitutional law, arbitration law, law of indirect taxes, corporate and securities law, to name a few. Dr. Venkataramani was designated as a Senior Advocate by the Supreme Court of India in 1997. Sir was appointed as a member of the Law Commission of India in 2010 and subsequently for a further term in 2013. Dr. Venkataramani was appointed as the Attorney General for India on 28th September 2022 and assumed office on 1st October 2022. Sir has represented several state governments, universities, central and state public sector undertakings before the honorable courts of the country. He has also been a special senior counsel for various departments of the Government of India in the Supreme Court and High Courts between 2004 and 2010, and has also been acting as counsel for the Supreme Court in matters pertaining to the service conditions of employees of the court. Dr. Venkataramani has been actively involved in academic activities since 1988, commencing from his association with the National Law School of India University, Bangalore, and is a member of the Academic Council of Vishwa Bharati. Sir is also a member Board of Studies of School of Law, Bennett University, and an adjunct faculty in several law schools, including Jindal Global University. Sir has been keen to contribute towards inclusive growth, the element of diversity in institutions of law and justice, and to use law as an instrument of peace and goodwill. He is also a resource person for the Bar Council of India in its continuing education program for lawyers. Apart from this, Dr. Venkataramani was co-opted as a member of the expert group constituted by the Ministry of Minority Affairs under the chairmanship of late Professor N.R. Madhava Menon to examine and determine the structure and functions of an equal opportunity commission. He has also served as a member of the Ethics Committee of the Indian Council for Medical Research, is a member cum office bearer of several national and international lawyers associations, and has served as a member of the Supreme Court Legal Aid Committee for many years. Sir is serving in an honorary capacity as the administrator cum receiver of Amrapali real estate projects under the orders of the Honorable Supreme Court. Additionally, Dr. Venkataramani was a law member in the expert group on welfare legislations set up by the Planning Commission of India in the year 1990, and a member of the South Asian Task Force on Judiciary to submit reports on the conditions of judiciary, and has been involved in several welfare legislation campaigns. Among his several distinguished publications are a book on the judgments of Justice O. Chinnappa Reddy, a volume on torts in the series of Halsbury's Laws of India, and a restatement of Indian law sponsored by the Committee on Restatement of Laws. Dr. Venkataramani is also currently working on a book on interpretation, theory, and practice. In 1997, Sir was entrusted the chairmanship of the Independent Monitoring Panel constituted by the World Bank, Government of India, and National Thermal Power Corporation to advise on and monitor the rehabilitation of people displaced by the NTPC projects in Uttar Pradesh and Madhya Pradesh. He was involved in the work of the International Commission of Jurists in the Afro-Asian region, particularly pertaining to the ICE-SCR. In recognition of his achievements and service to the legal profession, Dr. Venkataramani has been conferred with an honorary doctorate by the Chancellor of Maharaja Surajmal Bridge University, Bharatpur, Rajasthan, in the convocation held on 5th April 2003. On that note, Sir, I request you to kindly deliver the endowment lecture.
My salutations to the students first. You are my dear friends, because one common journey all of us have is a journey through law, which means that you are part of the nation endeavoring to march towards greater civilizational heights. So therefore, you are my very dear friends. Respected Chancellor, Dr. Sabita Ramamurthy, Dr. Raghavendra, Vice Chancellor, and Sri K. Jaydeep, Pro-Chancellor, respected Professor Dr. T.R. Subramania, whom I know for a fairly long period. I'm indeed privileged to be here, to be talking to you. Now, when this subject of constitutional governance and public policy from an Indian perspective was suggested to me, I thought I must learn the subject. It's presumptuous on my part to say that for even a lawyer with a long-standing practice, one can be said to be acquainted with public policy issues. Therefore, when the invitation from Dr. Subramania came, I started looking at my own understanding of public policy and from an Indian perspective. Talking about constitutional governance, well, yes, one can map the travelogues of the Indian Constitution from the year 1950 onwards. But how do you connect both constitutional governance and public policy? And that set me thinking and also made me do a bit of reading. So, thankful once again for the university to give me this opportunity to open up one more window of my understanding of law, constitution, and its relevance to the affairs of India generally. I would have loved to talk extempore, talking about one's understanding of the Constitution of India and what it means to us today. But there are some necessary requirements of an endowment lecture, and therefore I may be pardoned for reading out from a lecture which I had prepared, which is partly to be in due course on your hands, and partly to also to acquaint me in a particular direction and to connect both these subjects. Now, when the Constitution was born in 1950, imagine 1950, where many of you were not born. I was born in 1950. Probably those who are in this audience who were born prior to 1950 were not part of the birth of the Indian Constitution. So when the Constitution was born in 1950, the literate part of India stood in great expectation. The much-awaited newborn child, as they call it. The Constitution with its bright eyes and delightful forms. The other major part of India, in far-flung villages, were mute spectators. Well, the colonial master, namely the British, packed its last. The newborn child, called the Indian Constitution, was looking for national adoption. Between the dark days of partition and the optimistic deliberations in the Constituent Assembly to fashion a charter for new governance for our nation, we peacefully marched. That peace, which assured him a great momentum to nation building, continues to be with us today, totally undiminished except for a few skirmishes here and there. We need to talk about that fundamental building blocks of constitutional march towards redesigning our social order. For those of you who are now marched into law schools, the question of what do you mean by redesigning our social order has to be, and perhaps will not be, a question which you have addressed so far. We are fortunate to be guided and informed by thousands of years of being a nation, without reference to physical boundaries. We possess the unmatchable wealth of amalgam of cultures, faiths, religions, and languages, which have given to us a bonding of unique nature. When the Constituent Assembly discussed its future destiny in the shape of a constitution, it dug deep into the wealth of its past, but discarded the unwelcome and dead hands of the past, and looked forward to navigate into a country where none would bemoan their life as a burden. Are human beings merely a bundle of claims and rights? Is every one of us merely a resource for others? Is the state or the government the master of unconditional obedience? What is the bridge between the individual, the state, and the forces of production and distribution? Why is that we oscillate between socialism with its pure as well as diluted variations and the unbridled free market? What is public policy in the midst of all these questions? But the charter of Bharat of plenty and the Bharat of equality was not to be an unstoppable drive on the highway. The history of early constitutional amendments keen to break away from zamindari abolition to property regulation, from public ownership of resources to public control of the economy, did meet their oppositions. This early part of a constitutional history is not mere history. I think we should take a few lessons from it to understand fresh insights towards wise and mature use of the Constitution. I will return to this little later. It will be problematic and insensible to talk about governance outside the Constitution. The one has merged with the other. The question, however, is what is governance as directed by the Constitution, because we cannot treat the Constitution as a friendly advice to be embraced at discretion or will. The Constitution is also neither a handcuff nor a free ride. Constitutional rights are not unbridled discretions which we assume are integral to freedom, liberty, and equality. We seem to have traveled two paths along with the rest of the world. One path of rights and human rights, perhaps deep into the jungle of rights. The other, regulated but free economy. Governance and the range of choices for social action and the making of public policy thus seem to be under strain. By now, the layers of accountability of governance have been laid by courts. No functionary under the Constitution today can now claim immunity from accountability scan by the courts or otherwise. How do we, therefore, assess constitutional governance in the infant days of free India and in the multi-dimensional globalized days of now? The connection between constitutional governance, balancing rights with sublimation of oneself, economics, economic policies, political practices, etc., are very challenging. We cannot get answers by focusing only on domestic factors, though they are hugely impacting. If you discuss constitutional governance as a constitutional and political subject alone, the focus will be on what the Supreme Court has done in shaping the Constitution from 1951 onwards, when Article 31B was inserted in the Constitution. The long list of constitutional amendments also provide the source materials for drawing lessons on tensions in constitutional governance, the divergence between Parliament and the court in having a final say in governance. If we are to talk about constitutional governance vis-à-vis public policy, or public policy vis-à-vis constitutional governance, other factors enter into the picture. We can draw a clear picture of out of the 100 and odd constitutional amendments, a picture of the political process, ideological forces at play, correction of aberrations flowing from the failure of major rights enforcements, improving the federal structure, drawing the Northeast into the national mainstream, dealing with political party deficits through defection politics, etc. We can classify the constitutional amendments with reference to the social and political forces and factors behind them. Amendments which are politically benign, the 5th, the 6th, the 11th and the 18th amendments. Amendments relevant for strengthening or enhancing the federal structure of the Constitution, namely conversion of union territories into full-fledged states across the Northeast. Amendments around the 9th schedule to the Constitution, by large-scale addition to the 9th schedule to deal with challenges relating to land, property, tenancy rights, then amendments in the wake of judgments of the Supreme Court, namely the 24th amendments following the Golaknath case and the 25th amendment following the bank nationalization case, the 42nd amendment providing for large-scale changes of the Constitution, followed by the 44th amendment reversing the 42nd amendment, both of which were essentially fundamental political changes and changes in the constitutional structure. The 73rd amendment ushering in the Panchayat Raj system as an integral part of the Constitution. Amendment to the Constitution in relation to Articles 15 and 16, continuing and widening the scope of reservations in the public services, following the judgments of the Supreme Court from Indira Sani, Nagaraj, etc. The 99th amendment, endeavoring to deal with appointment to high courts and Supreme Courts, leading to the judgment of the Supreme Court in the NJAC case. And equally importantly, the 101st Amendment to the Constitution, which introduced the goods and services tax as a federal tax structure. One is tempted to ask the question as to whether these amendments have an overall perspective added strength and sense to the constitutional structure. This question is to be asked because, for constitutional law is very important. This question is to be asked because every shift in the power arrangement and power exercise procedures under the Constitution will necessarily have relevance for public policy making. As also lessons to be drawn from public policy in key areas such as education, health, housing, employment, management of resources of the community, etc., will give us insights into what one may call a constitutional audit of all of the above. This constitutional audit is not merely a legal issue. It has to be a social audit, cultural and civilizational audit, and law must be a facilitating tool. It is said that the base structure of the constitutional doctrine, which has emerged post Keshavananda Bharati, has brought in some disquiet about the necessary freedom and discretion within the democratic process. However, while we can boast of innumerable policy measures in the field of education, health, economic structure, poverty alleviation, administration of justice, etc., that have vastly changed the landscape of the country, we still need to look at some basic institutional reforms in order that the aims of constitutional governance and the means selected for this purpose through public policy tools necessarily correlate. I think that for both constitutional governance and public policy, the ends and means nexus is fundamental. The US Constitution is more than 200 years old. Beyond the 15th Amendment, it did not suffer major changes. Its amendment process is not simple. Though no basic structure, doctrine, or its equivalent has evolved there, the Due Process Clause has ensured significant judicial intervention in several domains of governance and policies. The degree of scrutiny by state action, by courts, such as strict scrutiny, hard look, etc., are product both of due process and the expansive reading of rights, immunities, and privileges of the US citizens. How does public policy take shape there? And whether does it offer as a model or a book of rules for adoption? It appears to me that merely because constitutional fundamentals are the same, the administrative functioning and the public policy demands for India need not be fashioned on the US example. Similarly, the UK or even communist China cannot be good examples. The one does not have a constitution and the other has a subservient constitution. A number of reasons can be cited. The national federal structures are different. The legislative and executive distribution of powers are different. The scheme of rights, restrictions, and principles for state action, for instance, directive principles in India, are different. Diversity in terms of language, faith, and culture. Therefore, before we look elsewhere for comparisons for public policy, we need to look at constitutional similarities or differences. Among the recent constitutions, such as the South African Constitution, or the Charter of Rights, such as the New Zealand Bill of Rights, there are differences which inform or guide judicial review and governance actions. The point is, constitutional governance and public policies are intertwined and reinforce each other. Very often, public policies or governmental actions or decisions are taken for reasons of political expediency and or skewed democratic persuasions, and which can go wrong or fail. Many instances from Great Britain can be cited, and these are worthy of being seen. I wanted to cite a few illustrations just to show the difference of how public policy in Britain has gone on the slippery slope. During the first 18 months in power, the post-war Labour government signally failed to draw up a contingency plan to deal with the possibility that severe fuel shortages might combine with an unusually cold winter to cause chaos. But massive snowfalls in January and February 1947 did just that. Factories were closed down, villages were cut off, livestock died 1,000, people froze in their homes without even the radio as a solace, since that too were the victim of power crisis. Then another blunder, less serious but notorious at the time, was the conservative government decision to develop and build a ballistic missile system called the Blue Streak. Designed in 1955 and originally intended for military use, the estimated cost of the system has sextupled from 1959 from years 50 million pounds to 300 million pounds. A year later, it was cancelled as a military project, partly because it was proving to be too expensive, but also because it was proving impossible to devise any means of protecting it from a first strike attack. But killing of the project would have seriously embarrassed the government, so ministers decided to keep it alive. By far the biggest aeronautical blunder of that time was the decision to develop and build Concorde, the world's first and last supersonic passenger aircraft. Ministers in Harold Macmillan's government, led by Prime Minister, believed that the future of civil aviation lay with planes that could fly faster than speed of sound. They also believed that building such a plane in collaboration with the French government would ease Britain's entry into the common market. They were wrong on both counts. President de Gaulle of France vetoed Britain's entry into the common market in 1963, and Concorde was a commercial flop. No countries would allow it to fly supersonically over land, and no airlines wanted to buy it. Though the two countries' state-owned airlines, Air France and British Airways, were in effect bribed into operating it. It quickly became known as the flying white elephant. Only 16 were ever built, and in 1979, the British government wrote off its entire enormous investment. Probably the biggest single further blunder committed by Harold Wilson's post-1964 Labour government was a decision not to devalue the pound, if not immediately, then at least within a year or two of taking office. Ministers were divided on the issue, but Wilson and his Chancellor of the Exchequer, James Callaghan, were adamant that devaluation would damage Labour politically and tarnish Britain's international reputation and relax the economic pressures on British industry to reform and modernize itself. From late 1964 onwards, Wilson as Prime Minister forbade ministers from discussing even the remote possibility of devaluation. But the financial markets had other ideas. They decided that whatever the government might think, the pound was overvalued and would have to be devalued sooner or later. Eventually, in November 1967, amidst mounting market pressures, Wilson and Callaghan did devalue it. Callaghan felt honor-bound to resign as Chancellor. Wilson as Prime Minister clung on. Several of the Thatcher government's later-day blunders were events-driven and media-driven. The mid and late 1980s witnessed a sharp increase in crowd disturbances at football matches in Britain and overseas. A riot in 1985 between Birmingham City and Leeds United fans caused the death of a teenage fan when a wall collapsed. Soon afterwards, crowd violence at the Heysel Stadium in Brussels led to the death of 39 spectators attending a Juventus-Liverpool match. Her government responded by introducing a football spectators bill, which reached the statute book in 1989. The new legislation provided for the creation of a football membership authority, which would administer a new national football membership scheme. In April 1989, the government's bill well on its way to the statute book. 96 Liverpool fans were crushed to death in an incident at Sheffield's Hillsborough Stadium. Like the Football Spectators Act, the passage of the Dangerous Dogs Act 1991 was an event and media-driven affair. All these examples are given in a wonderful book by Blunders of a Government, written by two outstanding authors from Britain. These select examples are cited to show that the Westminster model of governance and public policy is a slippery slope. It may thus be seen that the triangle, with constitution at the top and governance and public policy angles at the bottom, is a dynamic triangle. It is sometimes attractive to draw from examples and experiments done elsewhere. Either we mechanically copy them, or change and adopt them as our national conditions may demand. All discourses in law, political science, or social sciences need to revolve around definitions. As students of law, you begin with a contract act or a civil procedure code where you are taught definitions and how do you deal with definitions. Therefore, I understand that political science, social sciences need to revolve around definitions, concepts, and ideas. What is public policy can be seen from various angles, namely economic, fundamental rights, social justice, social order, national sovereignty, and currently global impacts and factors. All public policies can be likened to concentric circles, but internally connected and impacting each other. For instance, policy on education has relevance to equality, equal opportunity, gender justice, status, individual fulfillment, and employment too. Similarly, policy on health has impacts on longevity, maternity benefit, expansions leading to child health care, equal access to health care and disaster management situations, etc. Policy on rural employment and development has dimensions of balancing rural-urban growth, panchayats as self-governing units, and local democracy. Policy on the environment has implications for industrial expansions, health, and urban as well as rural planning, as also transportation. Policy relating to water resources has concerns of sustained development. Policy on agriculture has impacts on food self-reliance, balancing imports and exports of food items, and many of which have interconnections with world trade agreements and multilateral treaties. Again, we journey between unbridled claims for individual interest and collective welfare. In the process, culture, family, and organizing economies for dharmic way of life and fulfillment are subordinated. Public policies in the field of environment encounter people's protests, very often propelled by hidden hands. Courts' interventions derail and delay economic decisions. New roadmaps on least court interventions, institutional dialogues, and expansions of parliamentary committees, new forms of political party structures as bridges between the state and the people ought to be drawn. This should therefore reinforce values of culture, family as a great mediator of clashes and claims, and promotion of private space for public good and public space for private good. Critics of public policy in India cite the following as reasons for policy inefficiencies. 1. Excessive fragmentation in thinking and action. 2. Excessive overlap between policy making and implementation. 3. Lack of informed debate and non-governmental inputs. 4. Lack of systematic costs, benefits, trade-offs, and other consequences. In other words, the institutional structural problem and the institutional competence problem. Coupled with the above are the substantive and procedural legitimacy dimensions. The last two are intrinsically connected to constitutional governance. A good policy-making process would meet the following criteria. The problems and issues confronting a sector are subject to expert analysis. Opposing points of view within and between sectors are properly articulated, analyzed, and considered, and those likely to benefit or harm are identified and the reactions anticipated. Decisions are made with due legal authority after consultation of those likely to be affected and the involvement of knowledgeable persons in the sectors concerned. Policymakers and their advisors should have the honesty, independence, intellectual breadth and depth to properly consider and integrate multiple perspectives and help arrive at optimal policy choices within a reasonable time. All of the above are to be seen as a great bridge between citizens and the state. Government ceasing to be a weight or a burden will be the great public policy emanation. Writing about educational change, a teacher in the US, Fulan M. writes, I quote, "Changes met with failure because no distinction is made between theories of change, that is what causes change, and theories of changing, how to influence those causes. We have many theories on changes and policy making, such as top-down and bottom-up approaches, a combined approach, a rational choice theories, namely game theory and agency theory, as also a new entrant called disruptive innovation taken from management schools. Online learning or community colleges are few such examples. All these theories are products of sectoral approaches and also plans for treating the private spaces of people and the local conditions as public spaces for changes. The challenge lies in making this marriage happen. Few aberrations in policy making need to be noticed. The freebies basket, freely offered by political parties, is now becoming a permanent item of manifestos. I understand that the party manifestos cannot be beyond constitutional limitation, and no election promise can be a private plunge into public funds. If laws can be tested on constitutional grounds for their validity, I ask myself a question, why not? Party promises be immune from such scan. When policies such as these do not promote righteousness, resonating with ethical norms and cultural roots, they will not stand as dharmic flags for social change. The distance between buying votes and buying minds is not very big. Just as in law, so in public policy theories, there can be no one-size-fits-all solutions relevant to distinct social changes and concern public policy. A 2013 study by OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, on nature of policy change and implementation, looks at the multiple layers involved in achieving and effecting changes. For us, besides these multiple layers, engagement, what is important is the invitation of these layers to constantly inhale, that is, to inhale the constitutional framework and the idea of a constitution as both a walking stick and a bedroll. These are both constant companions for us. As also the yoga of freedom and dharma in the unique alliance of our country's great potentials. I would probably close my address today with a few broad observations. Now, when the Constitution said we have a march towards an egalitarian society with great promises of equality and eradication of equality of status, I mean inequalities in all walks of life, and promotion of equality of status, it meant things beyond our imagination. By the time the Indian Constitution came to be enacted, all across the world, several constitutional experiments have been drawn. Europe witnessed for more than 200 to 300 years wars between two major faiths, Islam and Christianity. The First World and the Second World War brought Europe almost to the brink of civilization. And when the Universal Declaration of 1948 came into being, at a global level, we thought that the two competing promises for deliverance, namely a socialist model and a free market model, the competition between these two, we thought at one point of time in future, we tell us which is the road to be followed. We have not reached that state so far. But we've drawn some lessons. One important lesson is that if through constitution or without a constitution, if we need to change a social order, And then who is going to be the agents of change? Who will determine how changes will be ushered in? Whether the agent of change, like a Communist Party of China, without being subject to any regulation or control by democracy, will be the agent of change? Or what's happening in a pro-Gorbachev China, Russia, where to a large extent they have not really moved into a democratic regime. Anarchy will be the social change, or unbridled, unregulated, as I said, a free market. And we look at the United States example as a universal brand of economic activity. I'm not very sure that any of these models have told humanity that here is a textbook to be followed by you. So, but important for us as a constitutional democracy is, if the Constitution says do and don'ts, and we have a political party system, a representative electoral democracy system. So the merger of all of this, subject to constitutional limitation, we have learned is a big challenge. That's why we see, despite elections after elections from 1955 onwards, we still not witnessed a peaceful transition to the egalitarian society. A peaceful transition I would envision, where our political parties would have a different structure, would have become avatars of a different process, and would probably look at constitution, as I said, as their walking stick and their bedroll. But today it is not so. So therefore it's important for us as constitutional lawyers and constitutional teachers to understand the potentials and the dynamics of being and with the Constitution. So as a lawyer, I suppose my utmost and more important activity in life is to be with the Constitution, is to not only be with the Constitution and take it wherever you are and make it part of our life as much as possible. And that's the way I suppose the discretions which enter public policy making, the discretions which enter our and clamor for rights beyond limits will be tamed. For most important for us, therefore, to understand how do we really use the Constitution. Our debates in courts only point us to a limited extent of what exactly the limits on rights can be. But go beyond the court debates. Plunge into the depths of what can be rights, what can be responsibilities, and what our own country has talked to us about being a dharmic individual. That's why I mentioned about family as a very important unit of moderating clashes between individuals. And I think it's foremost for us that if these values such as culture, family, and promoting civilizational values, if these three important values reinforce your life every day, I'm sure in future we'll be able to dictate and demand from political parties what kind of public policies entirely in tune with constitutional governance can be fashioned. That's why I refer to the freebie issues. It's going to be a major issue sooner or later. So political parties think that any promises, any governmental decisions can pass muster. I suppose it cannot be so. And every one of us, therefore, has a duty not to be a mute spectator, but a guardian of the Constitution. And therefore, I suppose that being a student of law, you take an oath that you become a guardian of the Constitution and unfailingly protect constitutional values and values. And I suppose, I always think that the invitation to be a student of law in contemporary times is a very inviting invitation. It was not so maybe about 40, 50 years ago. When we entered the legal profession, it was merely a litigation-oriented approach. But today you are part of the social and political process as lawyers and law students. And there's a larger area available to you. And please make the best use of that. And that being so, I would conclude by saying that Constitution, both in Part 3 and Part 4, ask each and every one of us to reach out to those who are in pain and misery, who are in need and want. And if you're not able to appreciate and understand the pains and anguish of those who are in need and want, then I say we are not a good lawyer or a good law student. I wish each and every one of you great careers in life and be part of the national mainstream in our achieving greater civilizational heights. Good day to all of you.
Sir, for your insightful teachings on the theme of constitutional governance and public policy from an Indian perspective. As appreciation for the accolades of our students, I now request our esteemed chief guest to please present awards in recognition of special achievements of our students at international moot court competitions. I request Dr. Chanjna Elsa Philip to kindly announce the recipients.
Our respected chief guest for the day, Dr. R. Venkataramani, other dignitaries on the dais, ladies and gentlemen, a good day to one and all of you. The academic year 2022-23 was a year of pride for CMR University School of Legal Studies. Our country, represented by CMR University School of Studies, marked her place at the international level of 2 moot court competitions, the Global Jural Conclave Competition and the Commonwealth International Moot Court Competition. I now request our chief guest, Dr. R. Venkataramani sir, to kindly present the mementos to the students who represented the school at these competitions. I also request our Chancellor, Dr. Sabita Ramamurthy, and our Pro-Chancellor, Shri K.R. Jaydeep, to kindly join him. Ladies and gentlemen, in recognition for being adjudged as winners in the Padma Bhushan Professor N.R. Madhav Menon Global Jural Conclave Moot Court Competition 2023 held at Loyal College, Greater Noida from 15th to 18th February. The mementos are presented to Anaka Hari of 3rd year LLB, Misbah Shan of 3rd year LLB, and Adira Manath of 2nd year BBA LLB honors. Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Bashan was also selected as the best student at the conclave. Once again, the winners for the N.R. Madhav Menon Global Jural Conclave Mooting Competition 2023 held at Lloyd College, Greater Noida. Thank you, sir. We also have, in appreciation for being adjudged as a runners-up in the Commonwealth International Moot Court Competition 2023 held at the Commonwealth Law Conference in Goa from 5th March to 9th March 2023. These mementos are presented to Monisha Nambiar of the final year BBA LLB honors, Rishvi Singh, final year BBA LLB honors, and Lekhna Patmanabhan of the 4th year BBA LLB honors. Ladies and gentlemen, the Commonwealth International Moot Court Competition 2023. We have Monisha Nambiar, Rishvi Singh, and Lekhna Patmanabhan. India has represented this competition at the international level only thrice. Thank you all. Thank you once again.
Sabita Ramamurthy, Chancellor, CMR University, to kindly deliver the presidential address.
Dr. R. Venkataramani, Lieutenant Attorney General of India, the Board of Governors, Dean, Director, Faculty and students of CMR University, School of Legal Studies. This being the first Dr. K.C. Ramamurthy Endowment Lecture on Constitutional Governance and Public Policy from an Indian perspective. CMR University, Bangalore is one of the few universities in India committed to the integration of enterprising initiatives and creative programs in the curricular activity. Transcending conventional academic orientation to inculcate within students a vibrant and more realistic outlook towards their life and career. In our ardent pursuit of this unique objective, we continue to organize events of national and international significance in new and emerging areas of law. In furtherance of its vision of providing a learning forum for students interested in this area of study and practice, the CMR University School of Legal Studies has instituted this endowment lecture in the area of constitutional governance and public policy from an Indian perspective. Dr. K.C. Ramamurthy's contribution to the field of education is immense. He has been continuing the great legacy of his illustrious father and our venerable founder, Sri Chikkamuniyappa Reddy. He has been instrumental in almost all the notable achievements of the CMR group of institutions and CMR University. Having served as a teacher himself, he recognizes the need to ensure that our students benefit from exposure to the very best minds in the country. Furthermore, his long experience as an administrator and leader has impressed upon him to nurture great faith in the Indian legal and constitutional system. At CMR University, we believe that India's future lies in strengthening liberal democracy and its institutions, as it is essential for achieving overall development of the country. We believe that our students, as future citizens, must be empowered with the right knowledge so that as our ambassadors, they will prove instrumental in the shaping of a strong, resilient, and powerful India. Great inspiring talks like the one we just witnessed today are very rare, and we must count ourselves as privileged that we are treated to a great discourse by one who is truly a master of his subject. Dr. R. Venkataramani represents the best of both worlds. He is not only a highly resourceful intellectual, but also an enigmatic speaker, a true fountain of eloquence. I cannot thank him enough for having accepted our invitation and delivering the first Dr. K.C. Ramamurthy Endowment Lecture on Constitutional Governance and Public Policy from an Indian perspective. It has been one of the very best beginnings that we could have hoped for, and wish that every year we will return with an equally inspiring and masterful lecture as our small contribution to posterity. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that wonderful applause. I deem it a great pleasure to be proposing the vote of thanks on this momentous day, the first Dr. K.C. Ramamurthy Endowment Lecture. Dignitaries on the dais and off the dais, we are very grateful to Dr. R. Venkataramani, Lord Attorney General for India, for having accepted our invitation and delivered the endowment lecture. I request our Chancellor Madam, also Pro-Chancellor Sir, along with the other dignitaries, Once again, a deep sense of gratitude to the chief guest for having delivered the endowment lecture. Thank you very much, sir. We are also grateful to our beloved Chancellor Madam, Dr. Sabita Ramamurthy, for presiding over this event and leading us in all the endeavors. Thank you very much, Madam. We are also thankful to Shri K.R. Jaydeep, Pro-Chancellor, CMR University, for his august presence. Thank you, sir. We are also thankful to Shri Jagannath Reddy, Secretary, Jnanadhara Trust, and Dr. Raju Reddy, Trustee, CMR Jnanadhara Trust, for their august presence. We are thankful to Dr. H.B. Raghavendra, Vice Chancellor, CMR University, Dr. R. Praveen, Registrar, CMR University, Registrar Evaluation, Dr. Anil Kumar, Dr. Suja Medan, Dean Academics, for their august presence. We are also thankful to our own beloved Dean, Dr. T.R. Subramanya, for organizing this event. We are also thankful to Dr. Sudesh Pai, Senior Advocate, for his presence and being with us. He is also a member of our Board of Studies. Thank you very much, sir. We are thankful to the members from the Judicial Academy for their august presence. We are also thankful to all the distinguished invitees, advocates present, for accepting our invitation. We are grateful to the directors of schools of studies and the non-school entities for their presence and accepting our invitation to be present with us. Thank you very much. We are thankful to the digital media and the print media for covering this event. We are also thankful to the police personnel for having given the support services. Thankful to all the faculty and the organizers for organizing this event successfully. No, I have not forgotten you all. Last but not the least, my dear students, a very big thank you to you all. I hope there's a lot of takeaways on constitution, governance, and public policy. Thank you very much.